Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ChiroBusinessMojo. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle player, or MP3 player. Welcome to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast, where we deconstruct the methods, marketing, and mindset of successful business people and chiropractors from around the world. And now your host, Dr. Richard Day. Dr. Jeff Langmaid is a graduate of Palmer College and a practicing chiropractor at the Laser Spine Institute, one of the nation's largest spine care providers. Over the course of his career, he's made a name for himself by founding an organization that connects chiropractors and physicians to provide more effective conservative care. He's the author of the book, Marketing Chiropractic to Medical Doctors, a step-by-step guide on how chiropractors can become integrated into their local healthcare community and organically tap into the potentially huge referrals that can come with those relationships. He's also presented and lectured at multiple hospitals and continues to showcase his expertise as a featured speaker at chiropractic conferences. Welcome, Dr. Jeff Langmaid.
Thank you very much. That sounded so good. I need you to read that every time I walk into a room.
That sounds like a great side gig. Just let me know. Any gaps we need to fill in that?
Not to date, no. I know we're going to dive into some of my history, but I've kind of been through it all, I guess. So I did graduate from Palmer, Florida, when that chiropractic school first opened, and it was the early days when Guy was leading the way down there, Guy Reekman. And I've practiced as an associate. I've done some coverage work. I've had my own clinic, and I've worked at, now this is my second multidisciplinary clinic. So in 10 years, I've kind of meandered my path and certainly seen behind the curtain on a lot of things, and hopefully that's what a lot of chiropractors resonate with and what I can bring to the table. So,
well, you're very accomplished for someone who's been in practice 10 years. That's about as long as I've been in practice. But I want to talk a little bit about the Laser Spine Institute. Briefly tell us about that.
Sure. Laser Spine Institute is predominantly surgical. So Laser Spine Institute was founded about 10 years ago by a physiatrist, by an internal medicine doctor, and a surgeon. And it's minimally invasive surgical spine procedures is really the niche of laser spine, and it's all about staying minimal. It's all about minimizing downtime, getting people up and moving. Laser spine's treated, I think, over 60,000 individuals over the course of 10 years at 7 locations throughout the United States. I live and practice in the headquarter location, corporate research and clinic, which is in Tampa, Florida.
So did you initially have to approach them and say, hey, how about adding chiropractors, or were they looking for them?
That's a really good question. So ultimately, I actually was practicing at a regional multidisciplinary group called this Florida Orthopedic Institute. It's about 40 physicians, and it's a hospital-based group as opposed to a Laser Spine is an outpatient facility only. So I was in practice doing well at a multidisciplinary group which had a lot of attention and clout locally. So it was kind of mutual where I had some interest from Laser Spine potentially going over that way. I was certainly interested in what they were doing in the minimally invasive model and any expansion into conservative care. So really the paths joined up concurrently.
Now, did you initially, did you want to, let me stop. What attracted you to a multidisciplinary practice?
Well, I always liked the idea. One thing that was challenging for me as a sole practitioner was just feeling, to be honest with you, a little bit siloed at times. And, from a multidisciplinary perspective, it interests me on a few different fronts, I guess you could say. One was that I just see a huge opportunity, meaning, since chiropractic's inception, we've been basically direct to consumer, but the referrals between providers has obviously been woeful. So it was something more of a challenge to me in the early days as far as a multidisciplinary practice, because I think it really opened up. I was interested in opening up borders, and I was interested in showcasing what we can do as chiropractors and ultimately highlighting the chiropractic adjustment. So that's what interested me. And the challenge of working in a multidisciplinary setting was something, I guess in college I had worked in some hospital settings, in some rehab clinics, well before I was a chiropractor. And I liked the kind of the team atmosphere, and I liked a little bit more of a scale, I guess you could say. So, that's the combination of those factors really made multidisciplinary practice alluring to me, but certainly the challenge was something that also had a great deal of interest.
How was the working relationship with MDs? I know when I first opened, I went straight into practice after school, and it could be a little bit intimidating, not knowing how you're going to be received. How has that been for you?
For me personally, it's been, I guess you could say, a tale of two cities. So when I worked at Florida Orthopedic Institute, there was a range of beliefs, thoughts, and relationships, meaning I had some great relationships with some surgeons and some of our mid-level providers, and I had some that I did not have good relationships with. And no matter how hard I tried, it didn't seem to go over. The same was in the community. As I started to reach out, certainly, as I'll speak about with the Evidence-Based Chiropractor, I think it's really about finding the people who resonate with you and your patients. So, I reached out to some MDs who were very, very aware, or even if they were unaware, very open to what we could do as chiropractors when it was framed in a context that they could understand. And then I found some that just weren't. Now, I'll be very honest, when I joined Laser Spine, it really was eye-opening. With any companies, with any healthcare settings, there are challenges. But one thing I'll certainly say about LSI is that I was welcomed immediately with welcome arms from everybody from our Johns Hopkins trained neurosurgeons to our physiatrists to the mid-level providers, and there's been an aura and air of respect for individuals' knowledge throughout my tenure there, and that's something that I do not take for granted, certainly, but it's something that's been very eye-opening and very pleasing for me.
Well, it's good to hear, and I think it's good news for anyone who is trying to or is considering reaching out to their local medical providers and working either in conjunction or maybe considering setting up some sort of an interdisciplinary practice. Let me ask you as a follow-up to that, do you think that more chiropractors should consider forming, instead of solo practices, some sort of interdisciplinary practice?
That's a good question as well. Ultimately, from a business perspective, I think there's value there. I think in terms of consolidation, in terms of truly working together hand in hand in the same space, sharing overhead, and certainly as far as marketing is concerned, I think that there's a lot of value there. Now, my niche kind of falls with chiropractors who are sole proprietors or sole providers or work with other chiropractors and how they can reach out to form referral relationships. So I think there are great advantages to interdisciplinary practice, but I see the first step also as forming those referral relationships.
Dr. Langmaid, let's shift gears and let's talk about your other business, the Evidence-Based Chiropractor. Why don't you briefly describe that?
Yeah, the Evidence-Based Chiropractor, I founded the Evidence-Based Chiropractor probably going on about 4 years ago. And it stemmed from a few of the things that we touched on a few moments ago. It stemmed from the fact of when I joined Florida Orthopedic Institute, my first day I didn't show up and have a plethora of patients eagerly awaiting me from the other physicians in my clinic. So it sort of struck a chord with me to say, okay, well, how can I go about this in a logical and reasonable way? And one of the ways I did was to start going to Spine Conference and to start reaching out through research to these providers. Long story short is when I would go to Spine Conference, I would see the surgeons and other providers making a lot of clinical decisions based upon research. So I thought to myself, well, maybe if I showcase some chiropractic research, maybe that would open their mind to what I am doing. And it certainly seemed to be the case, and then I expanded that to other providers in my community, and from there it developed into something where I said, this is something that might be sort of lacking across chiropractic, something that I have intimate knowledge with and have gone through, so let me start sharing some of this content, experiences, and ultimately support with other providers. So the goal of the Evidence-Based Chiropractor, by and large, is to increase chiropractic utilization, and ultimately we have products and services that focus on research, focus on referral relationship building, and that's where the Evidence-Based Chiropractor is now, and we have some great things on the horizon as well.
That's great. I wish I would have had access to something like that. One of the first encounters I had with a medical doctor was when an orthopedic surgeon new to the area wrote me a letter, and I assume he wrote a lot of different providers, and asked for a meeting. He wanted to find out how we could help patients that he couldn't help. And so we had that meeting, my wife and I, and sat down. It was a wonderful meeting, and we ended up co-managing some patients. But I was very nervous going in. I wasn't sure what he was looking for, what he was asking for. And, of course, like many things, you come out and in hindsight you have all of the perfect answers. Yep. Going in, it would have been nice to have a little bit of guidance. So it seems to be that's really what you put together here.
Yeah, undoubtedly. You hit all the key points there. Number one is that we know more. As chiropractors, we just have sort of this guard, and it's sometimes insecurity and sometimes bravado, and it can vary. But ultimately, we know a lot more than we give ourselves credit for. And we know more about the spine. I'll rival our knowledge base to really any provider of any level. And I think that shines through when you have open conversations with them. And really, the second point you hit home is absolutely the case. You know, you can't go into the NBA Finals right now if you took one team and they had no plan and everybody went out and just kind of saw what happened and then hopefully do it right the next time. Sometimes you can have success, and if you're a good person and if you practice well, which it sounds like you were able to do, that can really shine through. But for a lot of providers, especially younger providers who could be even more intimidated or nervous, having a proper plan is really essential. And a plan isn't a script necessarily, but it's having an idea of what you want to get across. It's having an idea about overcoming objections. It's finding out how you can serve their patients, and really going through it in a stepwise fashion gets by far the best results. So, yep, absolutely, I agree with you.
This podcast is all about providing actionable content for our listeners. So take us through it. Take us through going in, setting up the appointment, meeting with the MD, and follow-up.
Sure. You got 5 hours? No. Just kidding. So, in short, we really go through this step by step, and it does take some time, but I'll highlight a few of the important points. And really, I view it as 3-tiered. One is setting up meetings is a very important accelerator, that process. The more face time you can get with another physician, I think it accelerates the process. And that's supported by then 2 things. In my opinion, monthly research briefs, which we provide through the Evidence-Based Chiropractor, are a key component. It showcases and positions your practice as a leader in musculoskeletal care, and you provide that to your referral partners in town. It's a very important building block of positioning your practice locally. The third component is sending accurate case notes and sending the right type of case note. So, and there's a whole process, and it's very simple, but you want to tell the doc who the patient is, when they were in your office, what was the diagnosis, and what do you plan to do? With EMRs, people are overloaded with information, and I see too many chiropractors overdo it with the notes, where actually the nuts and bolts are what that doc needs to do to be able to ask the patient and provide social proof back from the patient when you do a great job. So those are the 3 core components. As far as setting up the meeting, I think there's very stepwise fashion to be able to do that, and it's simply calling the office, introducing yourself or your staff introducing you, and asking for a time to meet due to the fact that you co-manage patients and you haven't had the opportunity to meet yet. There doesn't have to be any magic scripting with that, but it just has to be straightforward. And then when you get into a meeting, and I'm sort of skipping some steps here, but then when you get into a meeting, as we touched on earlier, making sure that you use the Socratic method to ask questions about their practice and their patients, so then you can tailor your message with complete integrity about what you do to what can serve their patients best. When you have that key and that lock, that opens up for them the idea that you can take care of their patients and how you will be able to do so, which starts to stimulate that referral network, i.e. then supported by case notes, supported by monthly research. Now you start to have a winning combination in a very, very short period of time to build referral relationships. So that is it in a real nutshell.
All right. Well, can you give us an example of, or example of the type of study that would get an MD's attention? Yeah, I think there's a couple landmark studies out there. I like the UK BEAM study that was released a while back that really pitted exercise, spinal manipulation sort of against each other, so to speak. I think that's an imperative study. UK, as in United Kingdom, BEAM study. One of the other ones that I constantly talk about, and it's always a lightning rod, is Spine Journal, top-tier research journal, published a study which supported, of all things, maintenance adjustments by chiropractors. So now I'm not a big proponent of going in and telling a doc that you're going to
I'm more into the trial course of care, and certainly then if the patient wants to undergo maintenance or wellness care, it's important to be able to support that and to provide that long term. But the maintained spinal manipulative therapy from Spine Journal, I think, was unbelievably conclusive that there is significant value with that. From a pain management doctor perspective, there was a post-ESI, a post-epidural steroid injection study, which came out, and it was it was manipulation post-ESI, so chiropractic adjustment after an epidural steroid injection. That was a great study that fully supported, again, chiropractic post-ESI. So for a pain management doc, you're going to want to, again, tailor your message. And if you go in there and say, well, none of my patients should ever get injections, it's going to be difficult to build a relationship with them. But if you show them that together you both can, practice in the way that you feel fit and be able to provide better relief for that patient, better care for that patient ultimately, and really the point of that being better function, I think that goes a long way.
There's a wide variety of opinions and beliefs and philosophies within chiropractic. How has your book been received?
I think overall the book's been very well received. I mean, I think, early on when I started the Evidence-Based Chiropractor and everything was building specifically on Facebook, of course you'll get the posts that you wouldn't like to see. So, there's a wide array of beliefs and of practice styles. The biggest thing that I always emphasize anytime anybody, has a question, and if anybody's heard me talk or seen me lecture or at a seminar, I come from a place of highlighting and supporting the chiropractic adjustment. So, I really don't think there's too much to be argued with there. Now, some practitioners don't really want to have relationships with MDs, and I say, if you don't, that is A-okay. If your practice is thriving with the way that you're doing it, then go for it. I have no qualms about that. But for providers that do want to highlight what we do as chiropractors currently, highlight the chiropractic adjustment, and highlight what we can do for people and to other providers, then I think the Evidence-Based Chiropractor certainly is leading the way with that.
One of the things we emphasize on this podcast is that the chiropractor who is also an entrepreneur or self-employed, they should do things to differentiate themselves and set themselves apart. And how has authoring your book done that for you?
Well, I think when you put the words together, one, the book can clarify your vision. So I like the process of authoring a book because it forces you to get a lot of clarity regarding your own personal beliefs, your stance, and ultimately what you are teaching. So the process of authoring a book, even, the front end of it, I think is imperative from a practice standpoint, whether you're talking about technique, whether you're going to talk to your patients, other providers, other professionals. It really helps clarify the vision of what your thoughts and beliefs are, and I just never think that's a bad thing. The second part about that is I think it's really given me a little bit more of a platform to speak because, going through the process of writing a book, it sort of, it shows that you've done the work, and that you're willing to get out there and that you're willing to, put your name on the line for what you've learned and how you can help and teach other providers to be more successful. So I think the book has really given me a little bit wider of a platform, which is fantastic. But on a personal note, it really helped me clarify my personal visions.
Excellent advice. Well, what's one thing that is really exciting you about your business today, and where do you see your company in the future?
Yep, those are two really easy questions for me to answer. The biggest thing that I'm excited about today is that I have chiropractic members on 4 continents, active members of the Evidence-Based Chiropractor. Now, the Facebook fans and my email list has spanned the globe for a long time, but as far as active members that are participating in the Evidence-Based Chiropractor on a monthly basis, I have chiropractors across 4 continents, which is truly mind-blowing to me, and I'm eternally grateful that chiropractors look to me to be able to show what I have learned. So that is something that gets me excited each and every day, and it's something I never take for granted. The vision for the future is really to support chiropractors further. The goal, ultimately, increase chiropractic utilization, provide high-quality, high-paying jobs for chiropractors across a continuum of opportunities. So one of the things I'm really excited about that I haven't talked about before is Chiro Office Coverage, which is a coverage service that's going to be launching from the Evidence-Based Chiropractor to help match doctors with other doctors, chiropractors with other chiropractors as far as temporary coverage is concerned. So that's going to be something we're going to be looking forward to. We're going to continue on with the marketing, continue on with the research, but now we'll be able to have an audience large enough, and I do have an audience large enough, where now I can start helping doctors, providers, meet other providers locally to make sure that their offices are profitable and their patients are being helped even when they have to be away.
Dr. Langmaid, you've clearly been very successful in your practice thus far. Let's shift and talk about some general concepts of success, starting with, do you have a favorite success quote?
I have a new one today, as a matter of fact. So this is a really timely. So I was listening to a football player, retired football player, Hines Ward, earlier today, and I just listen and read as much as I can, and this was one that struck me today, and I hope I don't butcher it right now, but it was something to the effect of that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And that really struck me because it's something that I think is really applicable to a variety of us. I might not be the most charismatic speaker. I might not be the tallest guy or the best looking guy. But if I'm able to get out there and put in the hard work, the day-to-day hard work, then my message will be able to shine through. And I truly believe that's the case with every chiropractor out there as well. Putting in that hard work. You might not everybody can be the best adjusting doc, and not everybody's going to be Gonstead. But if you can put in the hard work, then you will truly be able to shine through in the long term.
Excellent advice. Let's talk about a specific failure, challenge, or obstacle that's been in life or business that you've overcome.
Yeah.
Tell us about that change and how you overcome it and the lessons you learned.
So that's a really good question. I think one of the greatest challenges that I had early on, I guess I could touch on two of them quite quickly. One of them was my initial practice model when I first became a sole proprietor was basically almost a box on the wall, believe it or not, almost a cash style practice. It was truly a cash practice, and I guess I shouldn't say it wasn't box on a wall, but it was a cash practice, and it was exceptionally challenging when I first got going. This is well before interdisciplinary referrals and communication came up with me. This is probably my first year out of practice. And it was a very challenging time. It was something where it took time for me to reevaluate where I was, what my thoughts were, how I could present things, and how that really applied to real life. Why do people come into my office? Why would people come into my office? So I think the challenge of struggling early on with a cash practice really led me to open up my mind to potentially other opportunities out there, but also, again, starting to refine my vision and starting to see how things that I learned can be applied in the true day-to-day of real life.
That's so true. We really, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and it's true in a lot of ways. It seems kind of trite, but certainly I've had my fair share of lessons learned the hard way, and every time I come out and have new things to apply that make me better the next time around.
Yep.
So personal success, are there any things you do in the morning, habits, routines, self-appraisals, those sorts of things each day that contribute to your success?
I am a get up and go kind of guy. So when I get up, I am ready to start work, get out my door, whatever I am doing that day, probably in 15 minutes. So I am not a snooze guy, I guess you could say. So I think one key thing is my ability just to get up and go in the morning. So that's something that I look forward to, really, because if I'm driving to Evidence Based Chiropractor headquarters, if I'm driving to Laser Spine Institute, one thing that I like to do is listen to podcasts. So whether it's chiropractic related, health related, more motivational, let's say, or lifestyle, as a matter of speaking, I think podcasts really are a great way for me to be able to digest content and supplement my reading. So I like listening to podcasts really daily in terms of gathering information. And I just got that Hines Ward quote that I focused on earlier off a podcast today. So, you can certainly get a lot from that. The second component to that is I like to keep up to date on research. So PubMed and Google auto searches, which highlight research directly to my email account. I love that because it keeps me abreast of the latest changes. And one thing I try to do every single day is post on the Evidence Based Chiropractor Facebook page, post something of value each and every day. Not one day, not 2 days, but hundreds, if not thousands of days in a row. And I've missed a few days in the last few years, but you'd be hard-pressed to find more than 2 in a row, I'll tell you that.
Well, I'm very jealous of your ability to get up and go. That's something that I have struggled with most of my life. Excuse me. And I think beginning with going to school and I went as a little bit of an older student, I had to develop some skills and things to get me to be successful, and it wasn't easy. So I can appreciate if you already have that pre-wired, that is fantastic. You're way out ahead. And the podcast, I absolutely agree. In fact, I think you would agree that once you do start listening, you sort of become addicted. You'll learn things. It helps to pass the time in such a better way than just jamming out to the radio, for example.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think it really took a big. I was a podcast holdout for a long. I'm a very technologically driven guy, so I felt as though I was late to podcasts. Being probably almost 2 years ago now, but I knew about them maybe 5-7 years ago, more than that, and it took me a while to jump on, but I could not agree more. And especially as my day-to-day picked up and my ability to really spend the amount of time that I was spending reading podcasts, exactly. It gave me the ability while I'm commuting to be able to get the same types of knowledge often in an easier-to-digest format, because you can't read and drive at the same time, that's for sure.
Right. Certainly makes good use of that time. Well, we are in the home stretch of the interview. Final thoughts. Besides your book, what book or any books would you recommend to Mojo Nation?
Yeah, that's another good one. One book that I always go back to, this is a little bit off kilter, but there's a book by Paul Arden, Arden. It's called It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be. It's small, it's light, you probably read it in 8 minutes or something like that. It's mostly pictures. He was a marketing guy. But It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be by Paul Arden. It's a book that I just pick up. I don't know. I probably read it every month or two. It just takes a couple minutes, but it always stimulates some interesting thoughts with me, and I just love that book. Certainly Start With Why is another important book, and the starting with why with any endeavor, whether it's business, whether it's personal, I think is an essential component of life. And that book really put it in a format that was completely understandable to many people beyond myself. But those are two heavy hitters that I would bring up off the bat.
What's the best business advice you've ever received?
Keep working hard. So that's not very sexy. But early on in the Evidence-Based Chiropractor, I was probably been really, I made the decision that, wow, this is a service I really think chiropractors would like and enjoy. And, a few months into it, I just didn't feel, this is years ago now, I just didn't feel like I was getting any traction. And I was speaking to one of my friends who runs a large company in Chicago, and I actually was in Chicago visiting him at the time. And, I was sort of, I guess, to a certain extent, maybe even a little bit envious, because he was very successful and still is. And we were up late one evening, and I was kind of saying, I don't know, I can't tell if anybody's paying attention, and I'm trying to put out the best content. I really think this is something that chiropractors would resonate with and would help them out tremendously. And he kind of, gave me the hard talk of keep putting in the grind, put in the time, do it every day, and provide value every day. It will inevitably be noticed. And ultimately, the best bit of business advice I've ever received is, I guess, twofold. Save your money, number one, and number two, really, again, it probably gets back to some core principles that you could probably pick out of this with me. Consistency and persistence and hard work are absolutely essential components.
That is so true. I talk to so many chiropractors who are just starting out, and they have in their head, how soon do I start taking those Fridays off to get to that 3-day weekend that I have every week? And there may be some very successful chiropractors who are out there that are doing that, but I think that it's easy to buy into that from the outside in and not see all the really hard work that goes into being successful. Just the other day, I was watching Shark Tank, and Mark Cuban asked someone, "What's your grind?" And the person said, "I'm sorry," and she did not understand what he was asking. And he said, "I'm out." And he explained afterward that success doesn't happen accidentally, and even at his level, he is working like crazy and not thinking about all of his time off. I think that gets forgotten a lot of times in success.
Undoubtedly, and I think there's an interesting counterpoint to that. I'm going to play both sides of the coin, because I think it's a really interesting topic. Is I listen to somebody like a Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's like a 22-hour-a-day kind of work guy, and that to me, that there's a detrimental point as well. So I listened to also a gentleman, Jason Fried, who I think is a fantastic businessman who owns Basecamp, and he's really the counterpoint to Gary Vaynerchuk in saying, well, you got to take rest as well. And I think I get exactly where you're going with it, and I agree with you, and more perhaps with Jason, which is you have to work hard, you have to put in the hours, but then recharge your batteries. When you're able to recharge your batteries, not excessively, but recharge your batteries, you're going to do better. So get sleep, take care of your body, make sure you eat well, work out, classic chiropractic things that we speak about every day. Make sure that you are a good patient, not just a good doctor. But second to that is make sure that you're putting in the time. And, for me, that means I'm typically at Laser Spine Monday through Friday, roughly 7:30 to maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I come back and I'm working 2 to 3 hours on the Evidence-Based Chiropractor, 7 days a week, 365. And, certain times I'll be able to recharge my batteries and I make sure I get a good night's rest. And I think the balance is important, but you got to make sure it's something you love, because putting in the time is an unbelievably essential part, and making sure it's consistent is perhaps even more important.
Excellent advice, all pieces of the success puzzle. What's the best way for people to contact you to find out more about your book, your businesses, and you?
Yeah. So you can reach me at theevidencebasedchiropractor.com. Theevidencebasedchiropractor.com is where all things evidence-based chiropractor take hold. Facebook.com/theevidence-based chiropractor. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. The website itself, you can reach me directly at jeff@theevidencebasedchiropractor.com. You can find my book at my website or on Amazon worldwide. You can find the Evidence-Based Chiropractor podcast on iTunes, on Stitcher, or anywhere else worldwide. And also, if we are launched, which we will be soon, you can also reach me at chiroofficecoverage.com.
Dr. Langmaid, thank you so much for being part of this podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Chiro Business Mojo podcast. Go to chirobusinessmojo.com for show notes on today's episode, and jump on over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review if you enjoyed the show.